I mean, for those of you who don't know who Donny Deutsch is, he's somebody who has had Trump derangement syndrome from the very beginning, MSNBC commentator. He is a Nepo baby. He is the product of his father's success, which he took over. I believe it was it an advertising agency?
Yes, Donny Deutsch.
Yeah.
Well, it's advertising. Yeah.
So what I think a lot of people forget or may not forget about Donny Deutsch is that as hard and as anti-Trump as he was, especially on Morning Joe and just MSNBC in general, he was caught once when the prospect, shortly after Bernie Sanders had won the Nevada caucus and was the front runner to become the nominee in 2020. Of course, we don't know how that worked out, but for a shining moment, it did look like Bernie had an excellent chance to become the nominee and perhaps change the country for the better. And Donny Deutsch made it very clear that if Bernie Sanders was the nominee, he was going to vote for Donald Trump. And then, of course, you had Joe Scarborough basically telling him, whoa, you're not supposed to say that on TV. That's not a good idea. And of course, he's like, oh, yeah, right. I forgot I'm on TV. I'm not allowed to say that on TV. I have to pretend like I give a shit about average people, which, of course, he doesn't. And so if you thought that was bad, he gave his very poignant viewpoints the other day regarding what's going on in the Middle East. And of course, Donny Deutsch is a Zionist, very proud Zionist. Again, checks all the boxes as an Ashkenazi, not a surprise. But this is a very hard rant, if you will, to listen to. But we're going to need Jen's commentary on this one. So here we go.
To start to really talk honestly about the definition of civilian casualties. 4 hostages rescued and 270 Palestinian civilians killed. We need to start to look at that word civilians. When the hostages are being held by a Palestinian journalist, a civilian, and a Palestinian doctor, a civilian, these are not civilians. These are Hamas ambassadors. And yes, there are innocents.
Really? Jen, thoughts?
Well, first of all, my thought is he looks like crap. I mean, I haven't seen him in years, but Donny, you look horrible. But that aside, I'm not sure exactly what he's like. This is just brainwashed propaganda talking points. He has no idea what he's talking about. MSNBC? Well, why are we watching this swill?
Well, I think it's very telling when somebody feels the need to go on to MSNBC, for example, and say that there is no such thing as Palestinian civilians. They're all Hamas actors or supporters. The dehumanization, as you have so often suggested, is the way that they're able to justify their actions. And Donny Deutsch is saying this potentially to, maybe a few million people that are going to hear it. Now, granted, a lot of the people who are viewers of MSNBC, especially a show like Morning Joe, are not people that generally care very much for the least of these to begin with. That's not who that voting demographic is catered to. But just the fact that he would go on national television and make this statement really says a lot about just how brazen the Zionist movement truly is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they're desperate too.
There is this level of desperation. I would agree with that.
Because it's the same thing with, like, you see it both in the public sphere when we see people at the protest, and you see it from the talking heads on TV. They're so angry and vitriolic and so unbelievably defensive that it just completely reeks of desperation. And I'm seeing it all over the place. If you have nothing else to do but basically call names, then you're out of ideas. So I mean, that's all this is fear mongering.
Yeah.
Civilians, but I think back to also the hundreds and thousands of rabid Gazans as they dragged their corpse through Gaza, cheering, hysterical with glee and joy. And it's just, once again, the media coverage is, and these were 4 hostages that were taken on a day that 1,200 Israelis were slaughtered, maimed, decapitated, killed in the most gruesome way. And I don't know if Americans had 4 hostages that were taken and we had a rescue mission, and yes, there were 270 casualties, and many of those Palestinian casualties are deep sympathizers of Hamas. Would the coverage be the same way? Would anybody be criticizing the rescue mission, or would it be truly one of heroism? But I do think we have to start to really talk honestly honestly about the definition of civilian casualties?
Let's do that. Let's talk very honestly about the definition of civilian casualties.
Well, according to statistical data, it appears that there are at least 40,000 that are now dead. You believe that the number is significantly higher than that?
I do.
Inclined to agree with that. Why wouldn't it be? You know, when they say
again, I don't understand that. Again, and I will often say I am not a math person. Like, I am definitely mathematically challenged, like significantly. But you have 2.2 million people in a closed-in space without food or water, being bombed repeatedly, and nobody's really allowed out. How does this end without all of those people dead? So the fact that now it's been, what, 8 months, and only 10,000 people over what they said 6 months ago, that's just, to me, that defies science.
Well, you also have to factor in the famine, the malnourishment that hundreds of thousands of people are dealing with. And every action that has been going on in Gaza has been genocidal by definition. But no one even wants to talk about what's going on in the West Bank and how you can even justify that behavior. And even there, we don't really know very much at all of what is actually going on. And I think part of the reason that is the case, which is, again, another example of how this is a genocide, the fact that there have been at least 120 journalists have been murdered by the IDF. And if you ask me, when you start offing the free speech analysts that are in the area, you probably are trying to hide some really devastatingly bad shit, which is why when they were able to capture the image of the decapitated baby, that was not something that they probably thought that they were going to have to deal with. But then, of course, they came up with every excuse in the book and suggested that it was Hamas that did that and not actually them, which, of course, is a load of bullshit, as we know. I just don't understand how anybody like Donny Deutsch is ever going to live this down when this is all said and done. Like, I don't know how they think there is going to be a light at the end of the tunnel for any of the people who stood in ceremony or in support of this. And he certainly is making it clear that, oh, yeah, I totally support what's going on. And by the way,
people will be dead. That's the thing. You know, not everybody will live to see that reckoning. Not everybody will live to see that the people that are on the wrong side of history have to acknowledge that they were on the wrong side of history. That does take a certain amount of time. I mean, I know what it is for me before. People that are not right on this, it's like, I don't know how you life. It's personal choice. It isn't about that. I think, you know, we don't want you to come over to the good side. We want you to come over to the good side. But at this point, for me, taking you this long to get here are just not my people.